started maintenance, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's over here.
I was telling Paul before you guys got here, we found some old pictures in there.
Fall River Wastewater Treatment Plant. I'm Paul Furlan. I'm the Administrator of Community Utilities, so I oversee water and sewer for the city. Wastewater plant down here. Veolia is the company that provides the operation and maintenance for this facility, as well as our collection system and all of our pump stations throughout the city. Here at the plant, we're a 106 million gallon a day plant. That's our wet weather flow. So we do primary and secondary treatment up to 50 million gallons, and then we do an additional 50 plus of wet weather during the wet weather flow. City of Fall River, we're a combined system, and about 85% of our wastewater system, which means catch basins, storm drains, roof leaders go into the sewer as well. So we do have wet weather capacity issues. Dry weather flow, we're talking anywhere from 20 up to 26, 28 million gallons a day. Wet weather flow here under a moderate rainstorm can jump up over 100 in the blink of an eye. We have a number of pump stations throughout our system. We have 2 CSO treatment facilities, so combined sewer overflows, which mean that once it starts raining, originally you have the combined sewer overflows pipes that went right down out into the bay prior to 1948 when the Clean Water Act was implemented. Once that was done, the interceptor drain was built along the shoreline, conveyed everything down here to the original plant. The plant's been upgraded multiple times over the years. So there was the original plant was in the early 50s, then we went into 70s with an upgrade, mid 80s there was an upgrade, early 2000s, and as you can see we're currently underneath another reign of major upgrades. Over the years, we've had to do about $200 million of work for CSO abatement, so to minimize the amount of times where that wet weather flow goes down and right out to the bay. So that's something that we've dealt with over the past 20 years, and we're probably going to be dealing with until I retire. So
When I was a kid in the 60s, I used to go fishing down here on, and I was fishing off this pier that was going out there, and I'm looking around, stuff kind of floating around there. And I said, gee, I wonder where that's coming from. It turns out I was fishing off one of the CSOs.
probably big fish because there's a lot of nutrients coming out of there. Also works with Veolia. She's our lab manager. I figured we'd start off up in here. We have Jesslyn to kind of walk us through the lab. The construction ongoing. We're building a new facility. We had an old incinerator that used to burn our sludge. We had to take that offline in 2016 with change of air quality regulations. So that's the big hole that you see over there. Used to be our incinerator building that was demolished through an earlier phase of construction. We're building new lab facilities and some new control room and office facilities over in that area. You'll see a dewatering building over here is under construction as well as our gravity thickeners. So a lot of construction work ongoing, and as you guys probably know, we can't just turn the switch off, do the construction, then come back to it. It's a continuous process. So we'll take a quick run through the lab here, and then we'll get out and we'll go down to the Headworks and work our way through the plant.
So, like Paul said, I'm the lab manager, Jess. I officially took over from the previous lab manager back in January of 2020. I can't believe it's already been over 2 years since Gene retired. But I started here as an operator in 2018. Worked as an operator for a couple of months. Then they switched me over to a supervisor role so I can train under the previous lab manager. I was lucky enough to have her oversee what I did for about a year. So I had her pick her brain, any help I needed, she was here. And it was godsend. TSS, pH, fecal, and TRC. Those are the biggest tests. Most facilities, if not all facilities, have to do those 5 tests. Everybody's permit's a little different. We have a 5-day-a-week permit for most of our testing. Some places are 7, some places are less, some places do more testing. It just depends on the location, how big your facility is, what body of water you jump into, that kind of stuff. Do you guys have any questions?
I have a question. So you mentioned that you started as an operator. What was the training that you got to get certified?
So when you go for, you mean the wastewater license wise?
Yeah, like so these guys are training so that they can take that class 3. And so I was just wondering about how you got into the industry.
So how originally, when I graduated college back in 2017, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, and I am actually friends with somebody that works in Veolia corporate. So she was like, well, why don't you just go and just intern under, her husband is a PM at a different facility, a plant manager at a different facility. She's like, go intern, he's looking for an intern, just.
We've done some upgrades for our CSO stuff from our interceptor drain that kind of follows the shoreline all the way from the Freetown state line, follows the shoreline of the Taunton River and the Mount Hope Bay, and comes into our Headworks area. The other thing that we had done, installed back in the mid-2000s as part of the CSO project, was what we call the CSO tunnel. It's a 20-foot diameter, 3-mile long tunnel that runs underneath the city, all the way to pretty much where Plymouth Ave and 195 meet. That's where the other end of it is. So all that, we'll walk right down here and then we'll take a left around the side. So that's where the other portion of the flow comes into our plant, and that's right over there across the street. And 9-inch sewer line takes it through the plant here over to our Headworks. Going on these tanks that you see right over here, these are gravity thickeners. So once you get the sludge out of either the primary or the secondary clarifiers, you end up with that thickened sludge or waste activated sludge from the bioreactor. In here is where it's stored. There's 4 of these tanks. We're reconstructing them. These 2 tanks are the ones that are under construction now. We're having a pump station go on the outside. We're changing up how we store it and how we're going to thicken the sludge. There'll be special storage for waste activated sludge and special storage for the primary sludge. So
We're going to separate them now.
Yeah. Well, no, it's still going to be commingled.
comes into the plant, comes in through here. Right behind us over here is where we have our pre-screening facility. So there's large screens as we walk in there that screen out any of the large debris. So they'll screen out large rocks, rags, any big floatables, mattresses, tires, any of that type of stuff. We haven't gotten any of that big stuff in a long time, I don't think, but it's amazing some of the stuff that comes in here. We just saw was a septic hauler truck leave. We take in septic, so septic haulers that pump out septic systems. They pump out the septic system, then they need to get rid of it somewhere. So they bring it down to us. We have a facility down the other end that typically takes in septic sludge for us, septic hauling. We're having an issue right now, it's down. So this is the other place that we're able to take it at the beginning. So we'll let him back up, and then we'll go around and we'll walk in between the two trees. manhole right there. But there's always flow coming into this plant. The plant, like I said, right now, I don't know what we're running today, probably 22, 24. Rain yesterday, we're probably a little bit higher, maybe 26 or 28 million gallons. You know what the flow was today, Eric? All right. But what we'll do, we'll walk around the truck, we'll go into the pre-treatment area. Treatment facility. This was constructed in 2000, redone, fully redone. You can smell the smell in here, the sulfur smell. You can see all the rust and rot on it, you know, on everything in here. That's not because of disrepair or anything. That's just because of the harsh nature that this has to work into. You know, it takes out aluminum, stainless steel, and rust, all that. So this is all hydrogen sulfide gas that's coming off. Because the wastewater at this point is very turbulent. When it's turbulent, that's when you start getting the off gassing. That's when you get where it corrodes stuff away, or it smells like this. This oversized Headworks up there has an odor control system. So the air's always being sucked out of this building, runs through the odor control system to get the odor out. And we saw how close our neighbors are. You know, our facility, that's one thing. We're a big facility on a really tight footprint. With this construction ongoing, makes our footprint even tighter. You know, we just had a project meeting this morning, and that was one thing that I said, that the contractor's really going to tighten up where his stuff is, what he's working on, just because there's not a lot of space here, but there's a lot of stuff going on. So right over here is where we have our screens. So this screen's now just on its way down. Heading down, it has floors that go down, grab the debris, bring it up over the top, into the conveyor that's on the back side. The conveyor then takes, pushes all the rags, dirt, and debris down, and it gets transferred into the dumpster that's over there. So this is really the first step to take out any of the large debris out of the wastewater. You see this come off? To be the operator in charge on grade 6, to be the operator in charge on the plant while it's working. So after you go through, you'll see right up over that trestle there, that's where the where that ductwork on the inside was sucking all the air out. Hydrogen sulfide out of the air, and then discharges the air up higher into the atmosphere.
And the reason for that, just so you guys know, is because if you look as we were walking down on the right-hand side, you saw those homes. They're very close to the facility, and they don't want to be smelling what's in sewerage. So that's why we have to have scrubbers on all of our equipment here.
Just from a historical point of view, that's Mount Hope right there, which is what this bay is named after. And I don't know if you remember from the Wampanoag King Philip.
bigger debris, we got all that out of the wastewater, right? So then what do we want to do next? What's the next step that we want to do? Anybody have any idea? We want to start to slow the water down, right? We want to get some primary settle. We want to try to get grit, sand, eggshells, or any type of larger debris, heavier debris like that. We want to get it out of the wastewater. So it goes through the bioreactors in there, comes into this area. This area takes and helps settle out all that. So you go from the wastewater moving, 5 feet per second, you're down to a couple of feet, 2 to 3 feet per second in these areas. That takes and lets some of the harder, heavier materials, the more dense things, settle out. What's called your grit. So these are really your grit chambers on this side we're standing on top of right now. That'll take, it slows the water down. As you know, when the water's moving, it's moving faster, it holds everything up in suspension within the water. The more and more you slow that water down, the more it's able to settle out. So if you take a bottle, you shake it up, you have sand and stuff in the water, you're shaking it up, it's going to be all dispersed in the water. You put the bottle down, you let it rest for a minute, all that's going to take and fall out. So that's what happens here. So this is kind of your grit settling area where all that will settle out. After here, it's going to go down into these round tanks down over here. And there's a total of 4 of them. These are the primary clarifiers. So right down over here, there's 4 primary clarifiers. 1 here, 3 more over on the other side of the building. That takes the wastewater after it comes through here, all the grit's brought out of it. It takes and it brings the water up into that center tube, right next to the middle of it. The water's still moving kind of quick, but it goes up into that center tube, then falls out and really slows down in the large pooled area. Once it slows down, that allows some of the sludge, so some of the heavier bacteria, to be able to go settle out of that wastewater, settle down to the bottom. So this is really the first spot where you really start to get, a sludge coming out of the wastewater. And it's all about being able to slow the water down, being able to let that be able to settle out prior to it overflowing. You'll see it round, that helps the process, and then there's all V-notch weirs all the way around the edge. And we can take a walk down there. But you'll see that helps even the flow out, the flow coming out of there. So when the flow is lower, a V-notch weir, how it works, when the flow is when it's lower, water comes out slower. As it moves up, as more water needs to move through, it moves up the V-notch weir. It allows more water to come out in an evenly concentrated base all the way around. So we can go down, we can take a look at the wastewater there. So again, you can see all around the edges, all the V-notch weirs that help control the flow, control the amount of water evenly distributed. So that helps slow the water down as it moves through this basin. The other thing you'll notice, just to the inside of that is another ring that goes around, all the way around. What that does, that takes and helps get any of the floatables, so any grease or anything floatable that's left in there, it keeps it inside. It doesn't allow it to come over the V-notch weirs. You can see on the inside of the ring, all the stuff floating on top. On the outside, there's nothing floating on top. This brake arm that's going around, any questions? Anybody have any
When we were getting down there, it looked like there were thousands of racquetballs.
Chlorination dechlor, our contact tank. So this is the end of the process. So we're gonna, after this, the water will move up to the top, so we'll go up there in a minute. Then it goes through our bioreactors, through our secondary clarifiers, then comes back down and gets disinfected in. Gets hit with chlorine bleach. That's what we use, sodium hypochlorite. Goes through the contact tank, and then before it goes out, it gets hit with dechlor. Sodium bisulfite is what we use down here for dechlorination at the facility. But again, you can see the difference in the water quality. Towards the end here, you end up getting some grease build up a little bit. That's still making it through the process. One thing that we find after a rainstorm, like we had the other day, you know, anything that's built up in the system, if a pipe's holding some grease or something like that, that's when you get a first flush of all that coming down through the pipes into the plant. So that's why, you know, through this there's a little bit more grease. We'll take a look. Actually, I think this clarifier is empty, so you'll be able to see what.
I was going to say, if you want to show them number 2, it's down right now. Down the line.
This is empty because we have maintenance to do on it. You have the rake arm that goes across the top, and then these are the rake arms that are underground, underneath the water. That whole entire assembly very slowly spins in a circle. It takes and it pushes all the sludge to the bottom center, which then allows us to be able to pump it out and pump it out. But this right here is exactly what that looks like without any water in it.
And those little holes right there are weepers. And what they do is they allow the groundwater to slightly come up if the groundwater gets too high, because otherwise if the groundwater actually rose, it could lift the fire up.
Even in one like this hasn't been fully washed down yet since it's been drained, but you still end up getting some dirt, some settlement, some debris that comes through, and again, primary settling is where most of that falls out. So we'll walk right around this tank, and then we have a tunnel that goes underneath the railroad tracks through the center of our plant, and we'll go up to the top section of our plant. The economics of it have a lot of municipal wind turbines that I've heard of that have done with the bidding process. It's tough because Massachusetts follow the regulations, because a lot of places where you work with, you're able to get help from other, like the city of Fall River. We have a purchasing department and everything. So those are the storage tanks for us, sodium hypochlorite, the bleach that we use at the end of the process for disinfection. So that's over there, the building over there, that's what we call pump house number 2. That has sludge pumps into the basement of it. So we have pump house number 1's right here, and pump house 2 is there. They both, down in the sub-basements, they have sludge pumps. That's what takes the sludge out of the bottom of these 4 clarifiers and pumps it up so that it can go into our sludge storage areas. Pump house 2, that also houses all of our pumps to be able to pump our chlorine, our day tanks for our chlorine, and on the other side of the building is where they take the septage in typically when everything's working over there.
What's the concentration of that?
Typically about 12.5%.
A lot stronger than what you have.
Well, that's kind of a long story. Essentially, I bumped into somebody while I was unemployed. Worked at Healy, and I said, "Well, that truck right here, next to
Gary, watch your step.
I don't know what he does." He said, "It's not for everybody." He said, "Take it."
This is the next spot that the water flows across the railroad tracks, under the railroad tracks, and comes into here. This is the pumps that go and pump up to where we do our secondary treatment. This area is rated for 50 million gallons a day, so this is where it divides on the wet weather. So this is where we would take, right now, today, like I said, 23 million gallons a day. Once we get up to 50, everything else would be diverted from here just down for disinfection. 50 million gallons would go through here, and the rest would just be run through disinfection.
How many gallons
Total of the plant, 100 and for secondary is up to 50 million gallons a day. The whole entire plant can take 106. No, originally there used to be what was called automated screws here that pumped the water from the lower level up. That's why you see that trough here on the left had a big screw that went up and kind of pushed the water up in a screw pattern, and it moved uphill that way. In the upgrades in the early 2000s, that's when we added these flight pumps that go through the tubes and pump up to our reactors. So at this point, we've been through and taken all the grit out. So we took any of the large heavy rags out, large rocks and stuff like that. We've taken the grit out, the eggshells, the sand, the dirt, all that stuff is falling out after that. Then we took out any of the big pieces of bacteria, all the big sludge, the heavy stuff was able to settle out. So this is dealing with a lot more, smaller pieces. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to try to get that bacteria to be able to grow. We want to be able to get it into a little bit bigger pieces so that we can try to get it to settle out. We want to try to get as much of the TSS, total suspended solids, that are in the water. We want to try to get that to fall out, because then that's less bacteria that we have to kill with chlorine bleach, less TSS that we send out into the bay. So from here, we go into bioreactors, which are behind here. Our plant is a little bit different than a lot of other plants. We use an oxygen-enriched environment, so our reactors are covered. Some places use bubblers from the bottom to be able to add air or oxygen into the water and get stuff to settle out. We pump oxygen-enriched air into the top of it, and we have mixes that help the oxygen come in contact with the water, get into the water. That helps the bacteria that comes from inside. It helps that bacteria grow. So it eats the other bacteria, it eats the food sources in the water, and helps it grow in the next area that we're going to. You can be 6 to 8, which is really quick for a plant. And that's where our where the oxygen tanks come in play. Other systems, if you didn't have an oxygen-enriched reactor area, the tanks would have to be about 4 times the size of what we have. That's very, very good for us, seeing the small footprint we're working on and everything like that. It comes into issues when you're trying to remove other things, nitrogen and nutrients. This type of system doesn't help that at all. It actually hinders that process a lot, and it makes it a lot tougher to get some of that stuff out. So with our permit, you heard Jess talk about the permit that she's testing to all the time. Our permit is actually pretty old. We're working on a 15-year-old permit. Newer permits that are issued have a lot of different levels of nutrients and nitrogen limits that need to be met. If we were issued permits with some of those requirements in it, we would have to build another plant right on the side of this one to be able to do that type of treatment, or the level of treatment that we may need to get to in newer issued permits. But we're working with the regulators, we're working with EPA and DEP to continue to move forward. Again, Fall River, it's tough because we're an old community, so we're dealing with a collection system that areas of it are 150, 200 years old. We're dealing with a plant here that the basis of the plant, is from the 50s. So you're talking 70 years old already. The incinerator building that we took down, that was one of the original buildings on the plant. That was from the original construction in the early 50s. The half of the incinerator was from the early 50s. And so we're dealing with this aging infrastructure, and we're continuing to have to deal with new regulations that come out. Nitrogen limits is one thing that we're going to have to deal with. CSOs is one thing that we're going to have to deal with. A new regulation that I just had to submit a plan on Monday was CSO notification. So whenever a CSO is activated now, so whenever we discharge stormwater through a CSO, we're going to have to put that on an interactive website within a 2-hour period. There's going to be a whole phone list that we're going to have to call, email blast we're going to have to send out to people that sign up for it. It's good because it's notification, it's letting people know, because that does send contaminants out, so people at a beach area or something like that could be affected. But again, that's another regulation that us as operators have to deal with. So, the water comes in to these diverters, gets diverted up. There's one train here, one train there, and then there's 2 other trains on the other side. Inside these white boxes are the mixes that we talked about. So after this, we'll go into the PSA building where we help make the oxygen enriched air that's pumped into the under where we're walking right now. These mixes right here help agitate the water to get that oxygen into the water, help the bacteria grow to be able to get heavier to settle out in the other areas.
And these white boxes are actually soundproof boxes.
Again, you guys went to Deer Island, and they're in the middle of a bay. They don't have any neighbors. They're in a nice spot. We have neighbors right on the other side there. We have 2 houses that are actually almost in the middle of the plant, an apartment complex across the street. So we have a lot of neighbors. A restaurant just off the south end. So depending on which way the wind's blowing, our team here does an excellent job maintaining our odor controls, maintaining, we have deodorant that we spray into the air sometimes. One of our big things that we get odors from is our sludge hauling and our sludge. So that's one of the things that we're always continuing trying to keep the impact down to the neighbors. Occasionally, if we have a scrubber go down or an issue within the process, we're going to have odor issues. But over the years, our staff has done an excellent job in decreasing the amount of complaints that we do get.
I was working, so I asked him, so how long have you been smelling it? And the waitress yells out into the crowd of people, how long have we been smelling this odor? And they're going, 30 years! No, just now while you're talking.
Types of water looping around. We have processed water, so that's water that's gone through the process. We have pumps down the bottom that we pump it into pipes and pump it throughout to be able to use. So rather than having to pay for the city water, even though I run the water department and I wouldn't mind getting the revenue on the other side, but then I'd have to pay the bill from here. So we want to use as much processed water as we can within our process to keep down the use of the domestic water. But some areas we actually have to use domestic water. I know on some of our pumps where we have to inject water into our packings to keep them cool, we like to use domestic water because sometimes the processed water could have some grit or some other things in it that we wouldn't want to pump into those bearings. So just going around, you'll see 2 different types of hydrants, 2 different colors, and that designates what type of water typically comes from. So during the last contract that we had, a lot of work was done in this room. This used to be the room where we had our primary switch gear. Our transformer for the primary service was right outside. It went to our generator, which was on the other side of that wall, which was actually a turbine generator, like a jet engine. Through the last contract, all that stuff was taken out.
Oh my goodness.
How's it going? No, go right ahead. If you want.
Sorry guys.
So we upgraded some of the MCCs, motor control centers, that operate all those mixers that you saw out back, all the blowers that are in the room next to us, as well as a lot of the pumps downstairs. So working in this field, you know, you're not only just going to be, you know, operating from a control room or anything like that. You know, you got to sometimes troubleshoot stuff, you know, in the middle of the night or deal with other things. One other thing that we did in this upgrade, right over there, you'll see the PSA control panel. So the SCADA control panel, we have where you have the ability to function some of the RAS and WAS pumps in the basement from that, monitor different things, and then all that sends it back through SCADA back to our control room too, so that we can get all that data back out of control room. So from here, I think we'll maybe go into the basement, then we'll come back up and maybe open the garage door.
Just go through the hard.
Down. What you try to do, and this is the same as the pump houses from down below, you try to get to the bottom of the tanks and put your pumps at the bottom of your tanks. So the tanks outside are probably even a little bit deeper than where we are. But you want to get your pumps lower, because it's a lot easier to push something with a pump than it is to suck something with a pump. So that's why you always try to get your pumps low and then push stuff up and over. What we have here, these are the WAS pumps. Does anybody know what WAS stands for? Waste activated sludge. So that's the sludge that we want to waste after it goes through the bioreactors and we don't want to use it anymore. So that gets pumped over to those, where we started off, those large sludge containers, where the big hole was right on the side of them. That's where all that gets pumped to. Then we have this container of pumped activated sludge back to the beginning of the bioreactors to mix some of that activated sludge in to help the process, to help that bacteria get bigger and bigger so that we can settle it out. But this is kind of what one of the pump basements look like. We have some more, this is a common that we have going down here. So within some of our deodorizers that we have at some of the other facilities, we have this carbon right here. So rather than using a chemical to strip all the hydrogen sulfide or the smell out of the air, you can pass it through a carbon like this, so a vessel that's packed with this carbon, and this carbon helps absorb all that odor out of the air. So there's two ways to do it. Do it with the chemical like we do on the plant here, so those are all chemical ones to be able to strip the smell out of the air, or you can pass it through a charcoal like this, which helps take the odor out of the air. This is extra for one of our vessels on President Avenue. Again, other things that we've gotten through projects, spare motor control center, you know, sometimes it's right on the end of the building. Those chambers have a special sieve in there that helps sieve off the oxygen in the air. So it kind of strips the oxygen out of the air. That's how we get all the oxygen to go into our reactors. If we had to buy all that oxygen, we keep in the white tank is actually liquid oxygen that we keep on hand in case we have to shut down the compressors or have issues with the sieve. But if we had to pay for all that oxygen, we'd be talking a couple $100,000, if not $500,000 a year to be able to do what we do with these compressors. These are large 400 horsepower motors that run these. They run up to about 60 to 70 PSI. and they move a large volume of air. If you come right down here, you can see down the end, there's a blue one over there.
You used to be able to, 21.
I'm not sure what the capacity is, but I noticed the backup system has a 30 ton. So it's probably something that...
You probably make 21, I don't know. Yeah, capacity.
After we go through the reaction on the back, fix with the oxygen, all those bacteria.
We have 3 of these secondary clarifiers. So think about what we looked at down in the beginning with the stuff floating on top, the water that was coming over was kind of cloudy, looked a little dirty. The water coming over right here is a lot cleaner. So again, you have the same type of setup where everything's pumped into the middle, then it takes and it comes out. This one has 2 separate rings. It has the inner ring and the outer ring, but they kind of both flow over the same exact way. Gets pumped into the middle, down to the bottom, then it's able to slow down. All that heavy bacteria be able to settle out to the bottom, and the clean water comes up over the top. Goes into that trough that goes all the way around, gets combined over there, and then heads down the hill, gets hit with the chlorine bleach, and then in the contact tanks that we saw down the bottom, those long serpentine tanks, that's where it has its contact time with the chlorine bleach, and then dechlorinated and pumped down into the bed.
I don't know if we can show them the partial pool.
Yeah. They get to combine together, and then they come through. They come through this right here.
About 2/3 back from the throat, so it's right around here, and okay, to measure that level, and so that's going to give you, by measuring that level, you can see the flow. Remember how I had you look down the end so you can see how it's backing up in the throat, and you can see
The oxygen into the water, made the sludge eat each other and eat its food that's in the water, so that it becomes bigger, come here, settle out, go back underneath the railroad tracks, gets hit with sodium hypochlorite, dechlor, and then out to the bay. Full cycle. The terminus of a 20-foot diameter tunnel was. So they brought in a big boring machine like you see, you know, on when they drill big tunnels for cars or trains or anything like that. They brought in a boring machine, set the whole entire thing up there, and they started boring right through the city. Fall River had an unbelievable granite structure underneath it. It's called the Fall River Batholith. It's actually, the city is built on it's Belgium quality granite, one of the hottest granites in the world. The guys that were drilling that tunnel, they worked in Europe, they worked in France, they've worked all over the world. And they said that this granite was some of the hottest granite that they ever drilled through. They were going through teeth quick on the machine, quicker than they've ever gone through it. So, just a little interesting piece about Fall River. That's why all of our beautiful old mill buildings that were built out of granite are still standing, because that granite is pretty indestructible. So, temporary ops building. This is our main control room. Servers are behind you. We have offices for our supervisors and operators. We also have a break room for the staff to eat their lunch or dinner. Main SCADA control. So from here we have control for a fair portion of the facility. We don't have control of the whole entire facility from here. Prior to our last upgrade down at the PSA building, the control panel that we showed you with the touch screen in the electrical room there, that wasn't there. You couldn't see anything from that building up here prior to that upgrade. You would have to go down there, make adjustments to the pumps down there, check what the flow was down there, and figure out what you wanted to do down there without being able to control it from here. You know, as we upgrade things and as more things come online, we're getting more and more connected together. From here we have remote access to a lot of our pump stations throughout the city. Again, we don't have it to all of them. Some of them are still on old, what they call dialers. So if they get a high alarm at the pump station, it'll come in over the phone. It'll be Wilson Road has high, you know, high flow has been hit, or you know, pump fault at South End pump station. That'll come in over the telephone pole, over the telephone. We have to send somebody out there. They have to look at it. Some of the newer pump stations that we have, you have full control from here. Turn pumps on and off. See what the actual levels are. Change set points for on and off. Some of the stuff we leave locked out because, you know, maybe we don't want to be able to change set points from here, because we want the guys actually on the sites to be able to physically see and visualize and make sure that it's hitting those set points. It's physically turning on and turning off. So maybe we want to lock some of that stuff out. That's always a decision when we're bringing on new equipment. What kind of access do we want to have here? What kind of access do we want to have locally? What kind of information do we want to have come back here? You know, all this information is stored on the servers for, you know, permitting reasons as well as other things. But do you want to run through just a couple of things on the...
Sure. Yeah, so again, this is kind of like your mission control here. So you've got 4 different screens. There's actually 2 SCADA computers here. And basically you have access to different parts of the plant so you can kind of see what's going on. Going through kind of like where we went through, remember we started in the Headworks building. So this is actually my Headworks building right here. I've got the influent flow from the tunnel. I've got the influent flow coming in from the city. These are my gates. It tells you the position of the gates, and you can also adjust them from here. I can see what pumps are running, how fast they're running, and basically it just gives me kind of an overview of what's going on. You also noticed when we were in the PSA building there was an operator that went by. So just because it says it's doing that on the computer doesn't necessarily mean it's actually doing what it says it's doing. So we have a series of alarms. If there's an alarm, we'll definitely go investigate, but as part of our regular rounds we also go and we verify that the equipment is doing exactly what we think it's doing. And so you can get to all the different parts here. So, you know, if you want to check out the aerated grit chambers, you just click on here, comes right up, same thing. It tells me the condition of the equipment, what's running, what's not running. If you want to look at the chlorine contact chamber, same thing. We can look and see what our residuals are like. Are we dosing enough chlorine? Are we not dosing enough chlorine? Are we dechlorinating it correctly? Again, all my valves, positions, and mixers and their conditions. So pretty much you can get a good feel for what's going on in the plant just by being in front of this computer. But again, we don't rely 100% on the computer because, you know, equipment does malfunction. it's just like your cell phone or your car. At some point it breaks down and it's not doing what you think it's supposed to do. And so we have total capability to check out, like I said, our pump stations and everything else, and anything that we don't have access to, we have to go physically check. We actually go out and check all the pump stations every single day, Monday through Friday, just to make sure they're running as intended, so that when you flush the toilet or when you take a shower, it all goes down the drain as intended. So any questions on that?
Yeah, I have a question for that.
Sure.
You said you cannot rely on the computer to see what's going on. Do you have a certain time, a day, to go to check those equipment back there?
Yes. So we staff this facility 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So there's always an operator here who can go investigate. Like I said, if there's an alarm, we're definitely going to go investigate. But during the course of a shift, we also go and we just check equipment, make sure that it's running. You guys probably didn't notice, but while we were walking around the facility, Paul's kind of pointing out the different pieces of equipment. I'm spot checking things and making sure that it's running at the right speed. I've got the gallon throughput that I'm looking for. I'm also listening. If I hear, once you've been through the buildings enough times, you can actually hear when something doesn't sound quite right. There's a different pitch to the tone of the pump or what have you, and you can tell that there's something's not quite right. Then I can put in a work order, maintenance can look at it, or I can do some troubleshooting. So yes, as part of our rounds, we go around and we check all the different equipment in the facility and make sure that it's doing exactly what we think it's doing. Any other questions?
I know they used to report it